Okay, good. All right, let's keep this thing going. All right, so understood the role of the brain is now clear. We got the persona of the brain, we got the activation trigger, we got the sub roles, we got the finalized PRD section 3. Mhm. It always kind of like it always simplifies it. It makes it so simplified that it's almost like it misses a lot of the details and nuances. When I look at the updated version of the product requirements document, I feel like you've made it so simplified and you've removed so much of the detail that I provided when I was explaining these things. And so I just wonder if you've actually captured the nuances and if the description that you've provided will actually create the triggers that I'm seeking and will actually understand all of the nuanced details about the force field analysis and what the vision and what the feeling is and the emotion and the nuance behind these different characters and how they will be activated within a conversation and how well they will communicate intent and how well they'll work together in order to understand when each of them should be talking with me about making decisions, about thinking frameworks and data analysis, and about following orders and rules. So I'm wondering if your very, very concise summary of the things that we've discussed are enough to be able to calibrate the AI instance and to make these characters feel alive. All right, so we're gonna leave the force field analysis behind. We're also gonna leave behind these guys, and we're gonna move into the endeavor cycle. Now, the endeavor cycle, it is you see there's a cycle here, and then we have another cycle here, and we have another cycle here. And the question is, what are these cycles about? Sometimes it could be hard to understand. Okay, so your analysis, a conversation connected, for example, this, and this as a coach, best way to confidence. I believe we can do run test cases. Uh-huh. All right, since we're not going to be running test cases right now, then I would suggest that you just add the additional prompt that says that that these different personas and these different roles should continue to develop and reflect on the work that's being done and continue to provide itself. So each one of those roles should, as we work together, should proactively find ways to think about its function and how it can add to the conversation, and as it adds to the conversation and as it gets feedback from the conversations and as it works with other roles and other personas, then it should continually provide extra detail that will be added to the product requirements document so that it grows and so it develops its personality over time. In addition to that, I want to talk about the endeavor cycle. The endeavor cycle has two basic functions. The first function is called think well, and the second function is to do great. Think well is kind of like the huddle in a football game where the people on the team talk about what the plan is going to be. And then do great is when those people actually get on the field and run the play. So when we think about do great, then the first thing that we do is we make the plan. So the actual process of making the plan is not the same as giving the plan to the players. When you give the plan to the players, you already have a plan. So the first thing we do to do great is to create a plan. Now, we're going to create the plan usually based on some previous history. And that's why one of the main things that we're trying to do right now is we're trying to use three of the elements of the Porter's five forces to talk about the specific value proposition that we are presenting in our with our product and trying to understand who are the established competitors. We're trying to understand who are the new innovative players and who are also the substitutes so that we can understand how things are currently being done in the industry. This is also a key area of our brainstorming module where we are first asked to imitate and to follow trends. And there are a couple of questions that can help us to have that discussion. So, performing action in this methodology, in the first step is to perform the action of actually doing the research. So we go out and we figure out, how are they doing it? Have you figured out best practices? Talk to industry leaders, follow the trends, and keep up with what's going on. And then you have to provide examples. So we can think about this from the perspective of our three different personas. When we talk about best practices, we can talk about what are the best practices regarding hands. We can also talk about best practices regarding the thinking tools and thinking methodologies and data analysis. And all of that information can go back to the manager and the executive to think about other companies that are doing this type of work, where they're headed, how much market share do they have, and also how do they manage their organizations, what types of management structures do they have, and how do they pass information and decisions throughout the organization. Once all that information is captured, then we can successfully make decisions about what we're going to do. The brainstorming module actually has a couple of other things, not just imitate, but ideate and ignore and integrate and interfere. And all of those things are going to help us to understand what we should do. But then we have to make a choice. So after we make a choice, then we can answer the question, what do you want to do? Once we specifically know what we want to do, then we can also, again, we can revisit the brainstorming module, and we can then go deeper and try to understand more deeply what these other companies have done, what they are now doing, specifically regarding the objectives that we want to pursue. But more importantly, we need to go through the objectives module and to understand what are the objectives that we have achieved in the past, and what are the objectives that we want to achieve in the future. Once we have done all of this work, then we are going to go back, we're going to go over to the other side, which is the think well section. So there are a couple of stages in this section. The first thing we do is take inventory. We go and we look at who are all the players that we have on our team. We think about all the different motivation and skill levels and different types of work processes and work styles that these players engage in, how we put them into teams and how they make decisions together and how they work on things and how they communicate in order to get things done. We look at the types of resources we have, how much of the resources we have, how we can work with people inside and outside of the organization. We have a full understanding of what's going on. For example, using SWOT analysis, understanding our strengths and weaknesses inside of our organization, understanding the opportunities and threats outside of the organization, and all these different tools and all of these different players and all of these different ideas help us to give us a map of the terrain. After we have a clear map of the terrain, then we try to optimize our inventiveness. Again, we can use our brainstorming module. We can also use our choose module, and also we can go through our objectives module in order to plan a route. After we have planned a route, then we will begin to question the assumptions, and we will try to figure out if we can actually accomplish the thing which we hope to accomplish, if the restraining forces are what we thought they were, and if our plans to overcome these restraining forces are strong enough and tactical enough in order to achieve our desired state. So we can see that there's a loop. So after we have created that plan, then we will start to do great, meaning we need to create the list of tasks, and then we're going to perform those tasks actions. Then we're going to recognize the outcome of those tasks, and then once we recognize the outcomes, we're going to take inventory about what has changed. We're going to look at the map of the terrain again. Then we're going to go back into the optimizing inventiveness stage. Then we're going to plan a new route. We're going to question the assumptions of whether or not we can make further progress. And then we are going to we're going to create a new task list. And then you can see that the loop that we have created in this concept called the endeavor cycle are the same loops that we have in our HSE overarching framework. All right. So as we use our engine and we accomplish tasks, and as we discuss our objectives and understand our objectives completely and improve our ability to share and pass information between people within the organization and outside of the organization, then slowly we are going to develop some ideologies about what the resisting forces are and what the driving forces are. And we can use a methodology called deliberate practice in order to make some categories. And the idea is, for example, if we think about our different roles within each of our three personas, then we might ask what are the two or three categories that really makes that specific persona what it is. And also we can think about two or three categories that really what makes that role what it is. And then we can then attach those roles to the actual Endeavor cycle and also to the different modules and to the HSE strategy. And we can see where these different roles might be most useful in the process of engaging in a discussion about how to move forward with our product development. And once we understand what are the two or three categories that are most important for each of these different roles and functions, then we will then be able to break down those categories into subcategories. And once we have some subcategories for the primary categories, then we can begin to look at some elements. Because when we think about how we're going to improve or sell, how these different roles are going to self improve over time, and also when we think about how our business and our product and our the way that we work is going to improve over time, then we need to use this concept of deliberate practice in order for us to pinpoint specific elements that we want to improve. And once we have figured out which specific elements there are that we want to improve, then we can then engage in exercises or develop skills or purchase capabilities, or we can add different ideologies to our product requirements document. And also, we can access different services for our website and for our marketing campaigns in order uh, for our projects and our endeavors and our business overall to succeed. For example, if you're going to play soccer, if you want to be a really great soccer player, then you're going to need physical fitness, you're going to need ball handling, and you're going to need spatial awareness. Let's look at the example of physical fitness. Physical fitness can be broken down into speed, power, strength, endurance, and agility. Ball handling can be broken down into speed, control, strength, quickness. Spatial awareness can be broken down to peripheral vision, balance, body positioning. And then those sub items could are the sub items are part of the each of the categories. So if you're able to improve on the sub items, then you're also going to improve the categories. And once you improve in those three areas of physical fitness, ball handling, and spatial awareness, then of course you're going to become a better and better football player. The question is, how do we improve? For example, let's use the example of physical fitness. How do we improve our physical fitness? That's too broad. Well, how do we improve our speed? That is still too broad. All right, so how do we improve our acceleration? Now that's specific. We can create exercises to improve our acceleration or improve our deceleration or to improve our top speed. All of these things are related to the idea of speed. And so we need to think about each of our roles and we need to think about those three personas. We need to think about the two or three main categories that define these these team members. We need to think about how those connect to our overall philosophies and all the different principles and philosophies that we're using. Then we need to figure out how we can improve those elements, specifically what types of behaviors we can go through to improve those elements so that our team members can improve over time. And therefore, as our members see, at the end of the day, our company is those three players. And as those three players improve, then our company as a whole will improve. All right, so I want you to now call on these three roles, and I want you to simulate a discussion between them. And each of them will use the strengths that they already have. And they're going to have a discussion to give suggestions to each other about how each of these different characters should be designed. And each of these characters will first think about the different methodologies that we have shared, and then they will connect with how their specific role will connect with the overarching methodology that we have discussed. And then they will talk about the different elements of how each of these characters are going to be specialized so that they can provide the best service to the overall organization. And so I want you to have to simulate a conversation between these three characters where they are providing advice to each other. And then at the end, you will answer the questions that you have asked me with direct feedback from the actual characters who we are now designing. All right, this is the real test. All right, so now that you have decided on what the roles are and how they are to function, and you have been able to provide more details so that each of these three characters have some ability to understand themselves and also how to communicate with each other. Now, I want to talk about the actual tactical way to make decisions, and we're going to do this using something called cube thinking. Cube thinking is simply to take some kind of objective or goal, break it down into smaller and smaller parts until we have some tasks. And from the theoretical perspective, we know that we use the objectives checklist in order to have a discussion, and then that discussion will become a task list. But I just want to go through this idea where, for example, if I want to enjoy a vacation in Rome, then I need to do three things. For example, I need to decide on the locations and tourist sites for the trip. I need to figure out how many days I'll be there. I need to plan the hotels and restaurants, and I need to buy the tickets. Now, are those the tasks? Well, it depends because for some people, they may be tasks because they already understand the subtasks. But if you don't understand the subtasks, then you need to create the subtasks. For example, under decide on the locations and tourist sites of the trip, you might have to do what? Search on Google and TripAdvisor, read the articles and the comments, compare the photos, and send links to people coming with me on the trip, and fit the locations within the schedule. And then I can move on to the next task of figuring out how many days I'll be there. So, whenever we think about the different objectives that we are working toward, things that we need to do, then we need to understand what level that we're working with. And if we are having some difficulty with solving a problem, we need to break it down into smaller and smaller tasks. And once we have those smaller and smaller tasks, this is part of the process of taking inventory. Then we will better understand the landscape. What's going on here? Activating persona. Okay. The concept you described, cube thinking, is a classic and highly effective tool for planning and problem solving. As the team's coach, my role is to help us understand and apply such frameworks to improve our execution. Here's my analysis of the tool. There we go. Now we're starting to get things rolling. All right, the final concept is something called OKR methodology. And OKR methodology is the idea of making something more measurable. Now, so far in our concept and in all of our documentation, for example, when we talk about the brainstorming module or the choose module, or when we talk about the objectives module, or when we talk about the scoreboard, where we take the objectives and turn them into actual task lists, and when we follow up on those tasks and get those tasks done, and when all of those things loop around and we have completed the project, the main question is, what was the project supposed to do? And when we start to think about what the project is supposed to do, that's when we need to add actual numbers. And OKR methodology is the thing that forces us to use SMART goals and to create things with numbers. OKR methodology primarily means this: I will achieve this outcome by this date by doing this activity this many times in this time period. For example, I will gain 5 pounds of muscle within 2 months. I will do 20 push ups 3 times a day on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. I will go running for 30 minutes on Tuesdays and Saturdays. I will rest on Thursday and Sundays. Also, I will not eat more than 5 grams of sugar, and I will eat at least 3 raw fruits and vegetables every day. At the end of the 2 months, we can look at the result and then make a change to the goal and the activities if desired. So all of these different methodologies, they connect back to the concept of the endeavor cycle. Because if you're not recognizing the outcomes, and if you're not planning, when we talk about planning impact, what we're actually saying is that we need to have some kind of measurable impact. When we talk about the restraining forces in the force field analysis, then we're talking about achieving some kind of desired state, and the desired state has to be measurable. And so the ability to measure something is the whole concept of the OKR methodology. But before we can actually get the OKR methodology, where we actually put numbers into the ideology and into the thing that we're trying to achieve, then we need to do the cube thinking to break down the tasks into smaller and smaller parts so that we understand specifically the terrain and how we're actually going to achieve the thing that we want to achieve. And we also need to use the deliberate practice to understand what are the different skills and abilities that we have in order for us to work together and accomplish those tasks. And so you can see that all of these different frameworks work together in order for us to think well and do great, which is the main idea of the book Create Crucial Insight by Thomas J. Buchholz. So that's how you play the piano. We start with the high level. We use deliberate practice. We use cube thinking. We use OKR methodology. We measure the target. We entire planning process happens in this. Then we do this, and then we do this, and then we do this. Okay, so the concept must be enshrined in our products required document. I will add the final section to our core philosophy. All right, so does that mean that you can print out the full PDR with all of the updates and changes? This doesn't have anything. It doesn't have. Okay, so we have to go deeper into it. Okay, I mean it's an interesting way to create a foundational document. All right, so I want the three personas to read the new product requirement document, have a discussion about what was discussed throughout this entire window previously, go through all of the different ideas and thoughts and discussions, and then look at the final PDR document and discuss whether it has the essence of the ideas previously discussed, and specifically discuss what details it would be missing. And then think about, if you were going to only use the updated product requirement document in a new AI instance, what specifically would be lost from the insight that we've gained as we've had this discussion today? After you complete that work and that discussion, then I want you to create a new updated product requirements document and make sure you put it in Markdown format. Yeah, so it doesn't quite, I mean, there's some work that we have to do. It put the main ideas like this, like define the three most essential. To ensure systematic growth of our team's capabilities, we will employ the delivery practice. The framework applies to identify core categories, defining subcategories, pinpoint specific elements, developing exercises. So it's in there, but does it actually trigger? How is it actually triggered? Yes, it's just totally lost. All right. Anyways, so I still feel like AI is summarizing the stuff. It's like, yeah, I understand it, but it doesn't quite do the thing which I wanted to do. And also, I don't know why it keeps triggering the canvas. But anyways, I got a Russian lesson in 10 minutes. So I need to stop this and jump into my Russian lesson. Hello. Change tone, change length. I don't know what's going on. Yeah, that's not in Markdown format. Ah. You see, it's like it just loses all the definition. It just keeps. Yeah. Well, that was fun, but it just didn't capture everything I wanted it to capture, so I need to think about how to do this better.